Okay, can I go? Good morning, everyone. Actually, I would like to express my pleasure to be here with friends and colleagues. And in the beginning, I would also like to thank everyone who have taken a role in organizing this wonderful and long-awaited event. Today, I want to just outline a brief presentation, which is lost now. Oh, here. Okay, here we go. I would be so sad to not show you this wonderful presentation. Okay, my presentation will be about two short tafsir books written in Arabic and in Persian, respectively, Tibyān and Mawākib, and that were created in the late Ottoman Empire in Istanbul around the 18th century and went to become more popular during the 2 centuries that followed. These two books were intended to be tafsir books, but during or after the translation, they happened to be kind of Qur'an translations, not the tafsir translations, but at the same time, they were sort of Qur'an translations. So, in order to place Tibyān and Mawākib in their proper setting in my story, I will briefly discuss here today some dynamics influencing Qur'an translation in one way or another. First of all, Islamic law has ever been a decisive factor in this story and the debates around the translation of Qur'an, and also the shifting. Can I get this screen? Okay. The shifting social needs as well played a role in this story. Also, I have things to say about the printing press policies of Ottoman Empire. And lastly, I'll try to argue that both the publication and the translation of Quran have been at the center of the religion politics in Turkey from past to present. But before going through this dynamics, let me start with the current news about Turkish Quran translation market. And in Turkey, we have nearly 300 different translations. While I was preparing this slide, it was 250. And I asked a friend and colleague, and he said the number is around 300. All of these translations were created within the last century. And this variety might be seen by some moderns as sort of intellectual richness. However, I believe that the main reason behind the explosion in the number of translations is mostly commercial. Because only a few dozens of them are based on a serious academic work. The rest are mostly prepared by some people who are unknown to the Turkish theology scholarship. Another issue with the Quran translation, not in Turkey only, but in all modern Muslim societies, the conflict between the conservative Muslim, mostly Sunni clergy, and Quranists who resist any authority other than the text of the Quran. Turkish Quranists, like their non-Arab fellows or comrades, if I may, limit religious authority to the translated version of the Quran. So the Islamic version of Sola Scriptura usually works through the Quranic translations. Handwritten mushafs are still widely used. I think they have kind of like a spiritual place in the hearts of Muslims, especially the memorizer, the Huffaz al-Quran, are using that kind of written mushaf in their memorizing activity. The mushafs combining the original text and the translation are most preferred version of the Quran in the market now. the digital Quran has been opposed by the Turkish presidency for a while, but it's okay now. There's no objection. Translation alone, as we see, or as we saw some other slides here, without Arabic script is seldom and not very welcome in Turkey. Many people, I believe, regard such publications as the product of a Qur'anist agenda, or it reflects the style of New Testament, I think. Arabic Quran with Turkish letters, this was created by some publishers for folks who don't know Arabic, but they want to read and pronounce something to get the benefit or the barakah or the reading. And but this kind of translation or the script was rejected by the religious authorities. That is the current pro-translation stance, but I should make a point that this was an anomaly from the traditional perspective. So actually, I don't want to give you all the jurisprudential options or positions of the scholars, but generally speaking, oral translation is welcome. Written translation, the first and the second category, is not very welcome in the pre-modern period. Excellent literary translation, I mean by this, that you try to transmit the beauty and the aesthetical aspects and unique aspects of the original text. It's not very welcome by the scholars. And practical literal translation does not have such a claim that it is transmitting the originality of the text, but it was not distinctive from the first category. And during the pre-modern periods, scholars thought that this is not very permissible as well. Exegetical explanatory translations are like short tafsir books. An interlinear translation, seemingly it started with the Persian translation made by a council authorized by Mansur bin Noor. So I want to go over through this introductory details. So we have here some quotations about why is the Quran untranslatable. This is a quotation from Ibn Qutayba. He is briefly saying that not the Quran only, but the Arabic itself is unimitable. It has kind of like rhetorical arts that unprecedented and unimitable quality. So this is the beginning of this story. In the absence of Quran translation, an Ottoman reader could learn about the meaning of the Quran through a number of ways. First, the circles that were organized in the mosque by imams and scholars was a means to reach the Quran out to the general public. And those who are luckier could go to the madrasa to study Quran and learn about the meaning of the Quran. The rural population had the opportunity to encounter traveling preachers, especially during the 3 holy months. Also, the literate people could read some scattered translations of the Quran in various genres of Islamic literature or Turkish Islamic literature. And also there were some translated tafsir books. The best known of these books was the tafsir of Layth as-Samarqandi. Because of early ban on Islamic religious publishing, which was only lifted at the end of the 19th century, it was extremely difficult and expensive to obtain a copy of these massive volumes, which were produced by hired calligraphers. I'll come back to this point during my talk. So this stance, a no translation position, began to change in the late 17th century. Not the Quran itself, but some short commentaries on the Quran were translated into Turkish from other languages, especially from Arabic, and adapted for an Ottoman readership. These books, as I said, served as Quran translations, and that's why I term this genre as quasi-translations. So today I want to focus on two books of this kind. The first one is Tibyān, this book, composed by Aintabi Mehmet Efendi as a translation of an Arabic tafsir called Tibyān fi Tafsir al-Qur'an, written by Khadr bin Abdurrahman al-Azdi. However, Aintabi drew on a number of other sources in preparing his work. So with respect to vast contributions of the translator, you might see some researchers regarding Tibyān as a standalone work. Even the library indexes hesitated whether to list Aintabi as the author of the book or just a translator. Is Aintabi an author or a translator? This question brings us to other similar questions like, is his work an original composition or a translation? If it's a translation, then the question becomes, is it a translation of the Quran itself or a translation of a tafsir written on the Quran? Or is it simply an all-in-one stuff? These questions are all about the hybrid character of these books. I think that we have to see this kind of genre within the tradition of shared textual construction, which was very prevalent in the Ottoman scholarship. So you're just picking up a previously written original text and adding to it some contributions that you have acquired from other sources, and you're just creating something new. You are just coming up with a new reconstruction. So somebody else can do the same thing with your work and come up with another construction. So Tibyān is covering more or less a loose translation of both the Quran and a tafsir called Tibyān fi Tafsir al-Qur'an. In the introduction of his work, Aintabi wrote that Sultan Mehmed IV himself had asked him to create a Quran translation that will bear all the linguistic features of the original text, and that the Sultan gifted him 4 volumes of tafsir books and 10 volumes on the Arabic language to assist him in his task. After finishing his work in 1698, Aintabi prepared 200 copies, one for the Sultan himself and another for the benefit of general public. I believe that the Sultan's role in the translation of Tibyān was extremely important because he wanted a translation which is having all the linguistic qualities of the Quran in Turkish. This is definitely not the viewpoint of the traditional Islamic law. Mehmed IV is a very interesting figure in this regard because he was very interested in translation issues. He considered translation as a means of a cultural progress in that period. In 1666, his chief translator, Ali Ufki Bey, who was originally from Poland, also translated the Hebrew Bible into Turkish for him. Tibyān became the first book of its kind to enter mass circulation after being published by the Ottoman State Printing House in 1889. The preface of the 1906 edition of the work attributed its popularity to the work's clear Turkish and the translator's sincerity. During the Republican period, it lost its popularity because some other translations entered the market. So Aintabi edited out the author's peculiar interpretations as well as certain details concerning Arabic grammar and the diversity of reading of the Quran. In his translation, Aintabi created a popular discourse full of parables and anecdotes and the hadith and that kind of stuff to make it close to the public. And yeah, you see here an example from the chapter Al-Imran showing us how he is dealing with the translation of the verse number 7. I want to give you a quick disclaimer. Some sentences here on the slide are bold. Actually, I made them bold to prove that his translation or his tafsir was containing a translation. If we bring them out and bring them visible. So as you see, Allah knows the interpretation of the allegorical verses, al-mutashabihat, so that those who are firmly grounded in the knowledge, they say we believe in it. So just he put additionally and however, actually I translated the Turkish version, Ottoman Turkish to English directly. So as you hear, or as you see here, Aintabi favors a particular interpretation to this highly controversial Quranic verse in Islamic theology. According to the interpretation, he promotes not Allah, not God himself alone, but also some individuals with deep knowledge or kind of like profound insight will know the meaning, the final meaning of the allegories. So he translates a specific understanding, a specific interpretations as to be the original meaning of the Quran. Another aspect that I want to mention here, Aintabi ignores here, is that Al-Azdi, the original author, says that those individuals with profound knowledge are the Jewish scholar who are experts on the Torah. But our translator, Aintabi, make them Muslim scholars. So Al-Azdi said in his tafsir, can you compare it? Yeah. Allah knows the true meaning of the allegorical verses, pause, and those who have sound knowledge about Torah will say, we believe in it. There is a pause and period. But in the text that I cannot see now, because Zoom stuff is coming over my screen. Okay, you can see. The second book is Mawākib. It was a Turkish translation of Al-Mawāhib, Al-Aliyya, which was originally authored by Hussein bin Ali Al-Wa'iz Al-Kashifi Al-Harawi in Persian. The book's translator, Ismail Farrukh Effendi, did not belong to the class of ulama. As a retired ambassador, I think the retired people are looking for something to do, I think. So he wanted to do something and translated this book into Turkish. Like Aintabi, Ismail Farrukh Effendi enriched his translation with quotations from popular tafsir books like Anwar al-Tanzil and others. Al-Mawāhib was translated into Turkish many times by multiple translators. Why? If there is a scholar in the translation, why you are translating the same book and then second or third time? Because the translations are not similar. Because you are creating it in each and every time. Al-Wa'iz Al-Kashifi, the author of the original work, was also an interesting figure as implied by his name or nisbah. He was a preacher who played an active part in Dawah in Khorasan, especially in Herat and Nishapur. His books, most notably Al-Mawāhib, spread through India under the name of Tafsir Husayni. and were translated into languages of neighboring regions, such as Urdu, Pashto, and some dialects of Eastern Turkish, like Çağatay Turkish. During his lifetime, the Ottoman-Safavid rivalry had not yet culminated in bloody wars. That's why he addressed both Sunni and Shi'i people. That's why both Sunni and Shi'i biographers listed them as to be Shi'i and Sunni respectively. He adopted an inclusive approach that he learned from Sufi masters and mystics in the region, such as Molla Jami and Ali Shirnawai and some others. The Ottoman legacy has always been attracted by Persian literature as well as Arabic Islamic literature. We might see Mawākib as a symbol of Ottoman affinity with the Persian-speaking cultural hinterland because of its Persian character and Khorasan origin. This is Mawākib. I was late to show it. I'm sorry about it. Some pages, just to take a look. And I have another example, which is very similar to the first one. When Talut, and I think there must be some end. When Talut and his troops set out, he said, "Indeed, Allah has tested you with a river." Okay, and the expression goes on. I cannot see my screen. So, but my point is that we have inside the text of the commentary an embodied and hidden undercover translation of the Quran. That's my point here. Tibyān and Mawākib deserve to be seen as a new genre in the literature of Quranic studies because they are different from previous tafsir works and later literal Quranic translations in a number of respects. They are neither literal translations of the Quran, nor are they literal translations of short tafsir volumes produced in other languages. They are rather a mixture of both, or a kind of creative translations that reconstructed a scope of brief interpretation beyond what the original text provided, functioning differently according to demand and social sensibilities. Thus, if a Quran translation was needed, they could be used as one. But if there was an accusation of a literal translating of the Quran, which might be seen by some people as a heretical act, they could be downplayed as merely a translated tafsir. In the late Ottoman context, they were ambiguous or polysemous works that they could be read in a number of ways, much like the broader process of Ottoman modernization itself. Okay, I'm skipping over some parts because I'm lost in time. I don't know how many minutes I have.
You still have about 5 minutes if you want to.
5?
3 to 5.
3 or actually, I thought that I have 45 minutes, right?
Including questions.
Oh my God.
If you want to have more questions, stop now. Sorry.
I must be a genius to say everything that I want to say in 5 minutes, but okay. But you will not see the end of the movie. I'm gonna do a follow up. Okay. So maybe I should say some things about the printing policies of Ottoman Empire. After these 2 books, printing press was introduced into Ottoman culture in 1493 by 2 brothers, David and Samuel, who immigrated from Spain, you know. But Ottoman government took an anti-publication, an anti-press stance, and government immediately banned the publication of the Islamic books and also took a further step and prohibited Muslims from publishing activities. The first state-run printing press house in the Ottoman Empire was established in 1727. More than 2 centuries later, the non-Muslim one, if I'm saying true. So in the early 20th century, if we come fastly to the last century, there appeared a heated debate about the literal translation of the Quran into different languages, particularly in Egypt and Istanbul. Interestingly, the blossoming of the print culture coincided with the Sultan Abdul Hamid's reign. There were many new ideas presented in the articles published in these journals. There are so many journals were issued. By some accounts, the number reached 350 journals in a short period of time, like 2 years. But during its classical period, the Ottoman Empire did not identify with an Islamic state. I'm sorry, with a Turkish state. But in these articles published, a lot of new ideas came out. One of these ideas was about the translation, directly Turkish translation of the Quran, and making up a Turkish tafsir, not translated from somewhere, but a Turkish translation of a Quran. But the proposal was basically promoted by the secular groups, classified as the Westernists, and also by nationalist circles. Some people in Islamic circles also supported the idea of translation. I think those people, the Islamic people, were mostly impressed by the Qur'anist discourses of Muhammad Abduh and Jamaluddin al-Afghani. You know their approaches and stance on the Quran alone. Maybe they did not declare this one, but closely we can say that. Actually, I feel distressed. Should I finish here, or because if you ask, please ask about the story of the Quran translation in the Republican period. Okay, because Islamist Abdul Hamid, according to the cliches, opposed translation, Quran translation, but the secular Atatürk promoted and pushed for it. This is a very the contradiction of the conflict of my story. Today's Islamists are 100% positive on the translation of Quran, but they are natural opponents of Abdul Hamid and they are proponents of Abdul Hamid's agenda, and they are harshly criticizing Atatürk and his agenda or secular agenda, but they are welcoming a work was done by Atatürk and promoted by Atatürk, but Atatürk's motivation was not an Islamic agenda. So Abdul Hamid banned or blocked the Quran translation for the sake of an Islamist agenda, because he simply thought that will divide the ummah. That's it. So the languages and so on. But Atatürk wanted to translate the Quran not for the sake of Muslims or Islam and to make it accessible, understandable, and for the religious agenda, but for a kind of secular agenda. He wanted to create a new state, a new citizen, which is reaching the Quran by himself without any authority above. So let me finish here. And thank you for listening well. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, I probably should have clarified this. So within these 45 minute slots, it would be ideal if we had about 15 minutes for questions. So if you could try to make your presentations no longer than 30 minutes, that would be great.
Okay.
Sorry, I really should have written this.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
okay. So should I go or wait? Questions or remarks? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sit down, I think. it's
Okay,
fair.
however you want.
The room is-
So,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Mm.